simple homeless man, forgotten in the city, upon encountering a millionaire, quietly whispers, "Don't speak." What if he held the key to your life? What if your silence were more powerful than any words? Today, we reveal the incredible story of an unexpected hero who saw something shocking on the street and saved a millionaire's life. This story will change the way you see the world, so hit the subscribe button to watch more stories like this. Ethan was a ghost in the city, an invisible man on the corner of a world that was always moving too fast to notice him. He was a forgotten veteran, a man who once stood tall and proud, but who was now just another shadow on the fringes of society. He wasn't looking for handouts. He was looking for a purpose he thought he'd lost forever. His days were a cold, gray blur, each one bleeding into the next with the constant hum of a city that didn't care to know his name. Yet his eyes missed absolutely nothing. He had a quiet dignity about him, a silent strength that most people overlooked. He didn't beg or cause a scene. Instead, he simply existed, a quiet observer of the human parade passing by. He'd watch the hurried steps of businessmen, the bright laughter of tourists, and the weary sighs of the city's workers. From his perch on the sidewalk, he saw stories unfolding all around him, little dramas and moments of everyday life that no one else bothered to see. He knew the routines of the people who worked in the high-rises and the times their shifts ended. For all his hardship, Ethan carried with him a kind of peace, a quiet acceptance of his situation. He had a meticulous way of organizing his few belongings, a simple habit that spoke volumes about his past life and his desire for order in a chaotic world. He was a man of routines, and his own quiet rhythm was his anchor in the turbulent sea of the city. He would sit for hours, just watching, and in those moments he wasn't homeless. He was a silent guardian, a protector of the streets. His mind was still sharp, his instincts honed by years of training and experience. He could read people, sense their intentions, and see things that were hidden in plain sight. It was a skill he'd acquired in the military, and it was a skill that had never left him even after he left the battlefield. He could tell a person's mood by the way they walked, their secrets by the way they held their shoulders, and their intentions by the way they glanced around. And it was this skill that would soon be put to the ultimate test. He often wondered what it would be like to have a home again, to sleep in a warm bed and have a purpose beyond survival. He remembered the feeling of camaraderie with his fellow soldiers, the sense of belonging that came with a shared mission. But those days felt like a lifetime ago, a distant dream that had been shattered by forces beyond his control. He missed the feeling of being valued, of knowing that he had something to contribute to the world. Ethan's routine was predictable, his movements a practiced dance of survival and observation. He knew the best spots to find discarded newspapers, the quiet corners where he wouldn't be bothered, and the perfect vantage point to watch the city unfold. He was a silent sentinel, a master of his own small, forgotten universe. He had no power, no money, and no influence, yet he held a hidden advantage that no one could have ever guessed. In his daily watch, Ethan had noticed a pattern. A man in an expensive suit, a titan of the business world, who walked by the same corner every morning. The man had a particular way of moving, a certain energy that radiated success. But something was off, and Ethan, with his unique gift for observation, knew that something was deeply, dangerously wrong. What he saw was a detail so small, so insignificant, that no one else would have ever given it a second thought. Now, let's talk about Marcus Thorne. He's a name that echoes in boardrooms and financial news headlines, a true titan of the tech world. His world is one of sleek glass buildings, private jets, and high-stakes deals that could change entire industries. He had it all: the private penthouse in Manhattan, the luxury cars, and a confidence that radiated success from every pore. Marcus was, for all intents and purposes, at the absolute pinnacle of what most people would call financial success. But for all his achievements, Marcus was a man driven by more than just money. He was a visionary, a disruptor who saw opportunities where others saw nothing. His latest project was a groundbreaking multi-billion-dollar merger that promised to cement his legacy forever, a culmination of years of hard work, sleepless nights, and daring risks. It was the kind of deal that came around once in a lifetime, the kind that promised not just more wealth, but a new level of power and influence. For a man who had everything, Marcus was surprisingly grounded, at least in his own way. He was a creature of habit, and his morning walks were his only real escape from the relentless demands of his life. He'd walk the same route every day, a simple routine that offered a brief moment of peace before the chaos of his workday began. It was a small comfort, a quiet moment in a life filled with noise and pressure. This one simple habit would soon become the most significant part of his entire existence. Behind the sharp suits and confident smile, something was off. Marcus felt a persistent, nagging headache that no amount of pain medication could touch. It was more than just stress. It was a constant, low-level thrum of discomfort that seemed to get worse every day. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough to make him feel a quiet unease, a sense that something was deeply wrong beneath the surface. He chalked it up to the pressures of his work, but deep down, he knew it was something else entirely. His life was a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and decisions, each one more critical than the last. The pressure was immense, but Marcus had always thrived on pressure. Yet this new feeling was different, a silent warning that something was out of balance. He would glance around, a fleeting, almost subconscious look of suspicion in his eyes. He had no real reason to feel this way, but his instincts, the same ones that had made him a billionaire, were telling him to be careful. He felt isolated, even with a massive team and hundreds of employees working for him. The higher he climbed, the fewer people he could truly trust. Every conversation felt like a negotiation, every handshake like a veiled transaction. His inner circle, his most trusted partners, were now the very people with the most to gain from his success and, perhaps, his failure. The stakes were incredibly high, and the air around him felt thin, charged with a tension he couldn't quite name. It was this feeling that drove him to his morning walks, seeking a moment of normalcy in an extraordinary life. He passed by the same faces every day, a silent audience to his success. But there was one face he never really saw, a man on the corner who was also a creature of habit. A man whose quiet presence was about to intersect with his own in a way that would change everything they both believed about life, about success, and about what it means to be truly seen. Every morning, without fail, Marcus would stop at a small, unassuming shop on his way to work. It was a simple, cherished ritual in his hyper-complex life. A cup of a special, warm soup he was convinced gave him an edge. He called it his focus fuel. It was a rich, comforting broth filled with vegetables, and it made him feel ready to conquer the day's challenges. He believed this one small thing was the secret to his sustained energy, and he wouldn't start his day without it. He loved the familiarity of the place, the way the owner, a friendly old woman, would smile and have his order ready before he even had to ask. It was a moment of connection in a world filled with transactions. He saw this simple ritual as his good luck charm, a non-negotiable part of his routine that helped him maintain his focus and drive. What he didn't know was that this seemingly innocent habit was actually the most dangerous part of his day. The headaches he was experiencing were no accident. They were a direct result of the soup he so happily consumed every morning. He was a victim of slow poisoning, a subtle and deliberate attack designed to weaken him over time. The poison wasn't meant to kill him quickly, but to make him seem unstable and erratic, to cloud his judgment and make him lose his edge. It was a long-game strategy, a dark and complex plot designed to make him fail from the inside out. The poison was carefully calibrated, its dosage so precise that it mimicked the symptoms of stress and burnout. It was a chillingly brilliant plan. The perpetrators were banking on his high-pressure lifestyle to provide the perfect cover, so his physical and mental decline would be seen as a natural consequence of his work. Marcus was unknowingly a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing, and his body was the battlefield. He never suspected a thing. Why would he? He was a savvy businessman, not someone who'd be blind to threats, but this was a threat he couldn't see, couldn't fight. His enemies were not outside the gates. They were closer than he could ever imagine. They knew his routine, they knew his habits, and they were using his own trust against him in the most sinister way possible. He was in a silent, solitary battle for his mind and his life, and he was losing. The irony of it all was cruel. The very thing he believed was fueling his success was actually designed to tear it all down. He felt a deep-seated vulnerability he had never experienced before, a constant sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He tried to ignore it, to push through the pain, but the more he fought, the worse the symptoms became. He was walking a tightrope, and the poison was slowly but surely fraying the wire beneath his feet. Little did he know, his quiet morning ritual had caught the eye of someone who saw patterns and details that no one else did. Someone who had nothing to gain but everything to lose. Someone whose daily routine was just as rigid as his, but for a very different reason. This man had been watching, and what he saw was a warning sign that something was about to go terribly wrong. One morning, the routine shattered. Marcus, a man who always carried himself with an air of absolute control, suddenly faltered. He was just a few steps from his office building when a wave of nausea hit him, sharper and more violent than anything he'd felt before. He stumbled, his hand shooting up to his head as his vision blurred, the city lights turning into a dizzying kaleidoscope of color. He clutched at the side of a building, trying to regain his balance, but his legs felt like lead. People rushed past him, a blur of faces and suits, none of them stopping to notice the billionaire's silent struggle. In a city of millions, it's easy to be alone, even when you're at the top. They were all too caught up in their own worlds, their own commutes, their own problems. To them, he was just another guy having a bad day, a minor inconvenience to be sidestepped and ignored. No one paid him a second thought, and in that moment, Marcus felt more isolated than ever before. But there was one person who noticed. From his usual spot on the corner, Ethan saw it all. He saw the subtle change in Marcus's gait, the sudden stiffness in his shoulders, the way his knuckles turned white as he gripped the wall for support. Ethan's instincts, honed by years of watching and waiting, screamed at him that this wasn't a simple stumble. This was something different, something deeply wrong. It was the moment he had been anticipating, the culmination of all his quiet observations. This was Ethan's chance, not for a handout or a plea for spare change, but for something far more profound. He had seen the subtle signs of decay in Marcus's health for weeks now, the slow progression of a hidden illness. He knew in his gut that this was the end of that progression, the moment of crisis. And he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was the only person who could help. The stakes were high, and there was no one else to step up. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan moved. His steps were quick and purposeful, cutting through the indifferent crowd. He wasn't running towards a handout. He was running towards a man who was about to lose everything. It was a true life-changing moment, not just for Marcus, but for Ethan too. His anonymity, his invisibility, was about to be broken in the most dramatic way possible. He was about to step out of the shadows and into the light. He was focused on one thing and one thing only, getting to Marcus before it was too late. He didn't have a plan, no grand strategy. He was simply acting on instinct, on the certainty that he was needed. He saw a man who had everything, a man who the world saw as invincible on the verge of collapse. And Ethan knew that the very thing that made Marcus a titan was the very thing that made him a target. As Ethan approached, he saw the look of fear and confusion in Marcus's eyes, a look that was completely out of place on a man of his stature. Marcus looked lost, vulnerable, and completely alone. But as Ethan knelt down beside him, Marcus didn't see a homeless man. He saw a pair of piercing, knowing eyes that held a secret he couldn't possibly comprehend, a secret that would soon turn his entire world upside down. Ethan didn't shout for help or frantically pull out a phone to dial 911. He didn't panic or draw attention to the scene. Instead, he simply knelt down beside Marcus, his movements calm and deliberate. It was as if he was a medic on a battlefield, focused and in control. The crowd, a mix of curious onlookers and people annoyed by the blockage on the sidewalk, started to gather. They were expecting a loud scene, a dramatic intervention, but what they got was something else entirely. It was a complete, unexpected hero moment, but without any of the theatrics. As Marcus's eyes fluttered, filled with a mix of pain and confusion, Ethan leaned in close. His voice was a low, urgent whisper that only Marcus could hear. "Don't speak. The words were an instruction, a command, and Marcus, in his dazed state, instinctively obeyed. The crowd was utterly confused. Why wouldn't a person in distress be allowed to speak? A few people started to grumble, offering their own advice, but Ethan ignored them all, his attention solely on Marcus. This was a bizarre, jarring moment for everyone. The people around them couldn't understand the gravity of the situation. They saw a homeless man giving orders to a millionaire, a strange reversal of roles that made no sense. They thought Ethan was just a crazy guy trying to get attention, maybe even a con artist. But what they didn't know was that Ethan's words were not for his own benefit. They were a critical part of a strategy he had been mentally forming for days, a strategy to save Marcus's life. Ethan's command was rooted in his military training. He knew that, in a medical crisis, panicking and talking can often make things worse. He also knew that if what he suspected was true, every movement, every word, could be a risk. The simple act of telling him to be quiet was an immediate way to control the situation and prevent a public spectacle. He had to keep Marcus calm, because panicking would increase his heart rate and allow the poison to spread faster. This was a silent, intense, life-changing moment, a decision made in a split second that would determine everything. Marcus, despite his disorientation, felt a strange sense of trust in this man. There was something in Ethan's eyes, a look of calm authority, that told him to listen. He could feel the cold of the concrete beneath him, the loud, rushing sounds of the city, but all he could focus on was Ethan's voice. The entire scene was so far outside of his normal reality that it felt like a dream, a surreal encounter he couldn't quite comprehend. What no one realized was that the whispered command wasn't just about Marcus's immediate health. It was a direct line of communication, a way for Ethan to signal that he knew something was wrong without raising a general alarm. He was protecting Marcus from the very people who might have been listening, the ones who had orchestrated this whole thing. Ethan was taking control of a situation that no one else understood, and he was doing it with quiet purpose. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their annoyance building. They couldn't see the unseen threat, the silent danger that had brought Marcus to his knees. They saw a billionaire in trouble and a homeless man acting strangely. But Ethan's focus was laser-sharp. He didn't care what they thought. He only cared about the man in front of him. The real plot twist was about to unfold, and it was all hinging on Ethan's next move. Ethan didn't reach for a tissue or a clean handkerchief. He reached for a simple, worn cloth, the kind he used to keep his few belongings neat and dry. With a calm and purposeful hand, he gently wiped the corner of Marcus's mouth. The action was so quiet, so undramatic, that most of the gathering crowd didn't even see it. It looked like an act of charity, but it was so much more than that. It was the crucial first step in a complex plan no one could have ever seen coming. The crowd's reaction was a mix of confusion and indignation. They couldn't understand why a man of Marcus's stature would be touched by a homeless man's grimy rag. They saw the whole scene as undignified, a bizarre spectacle playing out in the middle of a busy street. They grumbled amongst themselves, their impatience clear, completely missing the significance of the tiny, almost invisible smear Ethan had just collected. They were focused on what was happening on the surface, while Ethan was working on a deeper, more chilling level. To Ethan, the crowd's judgment didn't matter. He was a man who lived on the margins, and he had long since learned to ignore what people thought of him. His mind was racing, connecting the dots he had been collecting for weeks. He was not acting on a whim. He was executing a strategy. He knew that the substance on Marcus's face wasn't just residue from his soup. It was a key piece of evidence, a silent testament to a hidden conspiracy. This wasn't a rescue. It was a quiet, meticulous investigation. What he had wiped from Marcus's face was a tiny, shimmering trace of the same substance he had seen being furtively placed into Marcus's soup cup. It was a detail so small, so precise, that only a trained eye could have spotted it. For Ethan, it was the final confirmation he needed. The subtle pattern he had been observing had just become a terrifying reality. He now had the physical proof he needed to connect Marcus's symptoms to a deliberate act. This simple act of wiping Marcus's face was a silent declaration of war against an unknown enemy. Ethan wasn't just cleaning him up, He was collecting a sample. He knew that if he was right, this small piece of evidence was worth more than all of Marcus's billions. It was the key to proving that a hidden force was trying to take everything from him. It was a gamble, a moment of pure gut instinct, and Ethan knew he couldn't fail. He carefully folded the cloth, tucking it away as if it were a priceless treasure. He had to get Marcus out of the public eye. The crowd was growing more restless, their curiosity turning to annoyance. They wanted answers, a clear explanation for this strange event, but Ethan wasn't about to give them one. He had to get Marcus to a safe place where he could explain the impossible truth, a truth that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about his own life and the people he trusted. The people around them had no idea they were witnessing a monumental breakthrough. They couldn't see the silent battle being fought right in front of them. A battle where a simple rag held the power to bring down a powerful corporation and expose a deep betrayal. And the most shocking part was that the man holding all the cards was the one with nothing to lose. Ethan gently guided Marcus away from the chaos, steering him toward a quiet, forgotten alley just a few feet away. The sudden change of scenery was jarring for Marcus, who was still disoriented, but he followed instinctively. In that small, tucked-away space, the noise of the city faded, replaced by an eerie silence. It was in this moment, far from the prying eyes of the public, that Ethan began to speak. He didn't offer a dramatic explanation or a wild story. He simply started with what he knew. He began to describe Marcus's routine, a day-to-day rhythm that Marcus himself had never really thought twice about. Ethan talked about the precise time Marcus walked by the corner every morning, the way he held his coffee cup in a specific hand, and his habit of always stopping for that specialty soup. It wasn't guesswork. It was a detailed, methodical observation. Marcus listened, stunned, as this man who was a total stranger laid out the intimate details of his life. Ethan's words were calm but carried an undeniable weight. He explained that he'd noticed a slight discoloration in the soup on certain days, a detail so minuscule it would have been impossible for anyone else to see. He had seen the pattern, the slow, consistent poisoning that was making Marcus sick. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. The very thing he considered his focus fuel was actually a deadly tool being used against him, a terrifying, unbelievable true story that was unraveling right in front of him. This was the first layer of the shocking truth, the initial revelation that would open Marcus's eyes to the magnitude of the betrayal. He had always been a man who trusted data, but here was a man who trusted observation, and in this moment, Ethan's quiet observation was proving to be more powerful than all the analytics and security systems in the world. He had been completely blind to the danger, and it had been staring him in the face every single day, disguised as his favorite morning meal. The fear that crept over Marcus wasn't just about his own health. It was about the people around him. If this was true, then his life wasn't just in danger, it was being systematically dismantled by someone he knew, someone he trusted. The simple routine he loved was a lie, and the comfort he took in it was an illusion. The feeling of betrayal was far worse than the feeling of sickness. It was a violation of his trust, a deep-seated wound that would take a long time to heal. He looked at Ethan, this man who had nothing, and a profound sense of humility washed over him. Here was a person who had seen through the noise and the superficiality of his life, a person who had seen the real danger that was lurking in the shadows. Ethan didn't need a spreadsheet or a security report to know something was wrong. He had a different kind of intelligence, a different kind of wisdom, and it was that wisdom that was about to save Marcus's life and his entire empire. The next question was the one that truly gelled his blood. Who could have done this? The answer was hidden just below the surface, and it was about to be revealed in a way that would shake Marcus's world to its core. The medical reports all read the same: high stress, extreme pressure, a need to slow down. The doctors, with all their advanced degrees and diagnostic tools, couldn't find a single thing wrong. They'd blamed his recurring headaches and dizzy spells on the brutal grind of the tech world, telling him he was overworked and needed to rest. But Ethan saw what they couldn't. He saw the pattern, the silent, deliberate attack happening in plain sight. He had seen the way Marcus's body was reacting, and he knew it wasn't a natural process at all. Ethan explained, in a voice that was eerily calm, that Marcus had been a victim of slow poisoning. He explained that the substance in the soup wasn't a one-time lethal dose, but a subtle accumulation of toxins. It was a cold, calculated method designed to systematically weaken him over time. The goal was to make him appear disoriented and unstable, to cloud his judgment and make him lose control of his empire. He was being set up to fail, to crash and burn in a spectacular and public way. The chilling reality was that the poison was calibrated to cause a heart attack or a stroke, something that would be easily dismissed as the tragic consequence of a high-pressure life. This was a plan so intricate, so sinister, that it could only have been orchestrated by someone with a deep understanding of Marcus's life, his habits, and his vulnerabilities. This wasn't a random act. It was a personal betrayal on a level that Marcus couldn't even fathom. A wave of cold dread washed over Marcus. He'd faced down cutthroat competitors and hostile takeovers, but this was different. This was a silent war being waged on his own body, a war he didn't even know he was in. He looked at Ethan, the man who had seen it all from the shadows, and a terrifying thought crossed his mind. If Ethan was right, then his entire financial success was built on a foundation of betrayal, a betrayal that was slowly killing him. He was suddenly seeing his entire life with new eyes. The trust he had in his inner circle, his most valuable relationships, was now in question. The feeling was worse than the pain of the headaches. It was a profound sense of isolation and violation. The idea that someone he knew and trusted could be so cold, so cruel, so willing to destroy him for money and power, was a plot twist he couldn't have written in his wildest nightmares. But the most terrifying part of all wasn't the what, it was the who. The identity of the person behind this plot was the final piece of the puzzle, the missing link that would make the whole dark picture come into focus. The truth was hiding just below the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And when it did, it would be a revelation so shocking it would gel his blood. The question hung in the air between them, a silent accusation. Who was trying to kill a millionaire? The answer was a secret that a homeless man was about to reveal, and it was far more chilling than Marcus could ever imagine. The question lingered in the air, a silent bomb waiting to detonate. And then Ethan gave him the answer. In a low, steady voice, he revealed the name of the man who was orchestrating the whole thing. One of Marcus's oldest friends and business partners. The name was a familiar one, a person Marcus had trusted with his secrets, his company, and his legacy. The name hit him like a physical blow, a stunning plot twist that made the nausea return. This time born of pure shock and disbelief. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, it felt like an impossible fiction. Marcus had shared countless meals and celebrated endless victories with this man. They had built an empire together, brick by painstaking brick. The idea that his partner, a man he considered family, could be responsible for this cold, calculated attack on his life, on his health, was incomprehensible. It was a level of deceit that Marcus had never imagined, not even in the most ruthless corners of the business world. But the most stunning part was how Ethan knew. He explained that he hadn't discovered the truth through corporate espionage or some complex investigation. He had seen it in a simple, fleeting gesture. He described how Marcus's partner would occasionally stop at the same soup shop and, with a casual glance, give a subtle hand signal to the person behind the counter. It was a secret sign, a silent command that no one else would ever notice, a way to signal that the soup was for the target, for Marcus. Ethan, with his years of training and a unique gift for observation, had been watching. He'd seen the silent exchange, the subtle nod, and the chilling finality of the act. He had no way of knowing what it meant at the time, but he had stored the information away, a quiet detail in his mental catalog of the city's rhythms. It was only when Marcus began to show the symptoms that the puzzle pieces clicked into place, and the true meaning of the gesture became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a professional betrayal. It was a deeply personal one, a violation of the sacred bond of trust. It was an act of pure evil disguised as a friendly encounter. The partner had been playing a long, cold game, and he had used a simple daily ritual to poison the man he called his friend. The full weight of the powerful betrayal settled over Marcus, a cold, sickening realization. The real danger wasn't from a competitor, but from the man sitting at the table across from him every day. Marcus now understood that his world was a house of cards, built on a foundation of lies and greed. His life was not just in danger, but his entire sense of reality was shattered. His biggest enemy wasn't some rival company. It was the person who was supposed to have his back. The discovery was a complete, unbelievable true story, a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes, the people who smile at you the most are the ones holding the knife. He had to act fast. He had a piece of a rag with the evidence, and the knowledge of a plot that could bring down his entire empire and put him in a grave. The question was, what was a homeless man and a poisoned millionaire going to do next? Ethan carefully took out the folded rag, the same one he had used just moments ago. It was a simple, unassuming piece of cloth, yet it was the most important thing in the world right now. He held it out to Marcus, not as a gift, but as irrefutable proof. On it was a faint, almost invisible residue, the very substance that had been making Marcus sick. It was a tangible piece of evidence, something that no one, not his partner, not his security team, not even the doctors, could dismiss as paranoia. This was the moment of truth, the point where all the stories, all the observations, and all the quiet suspicions became real. Marcus looked at the cloth in disbelief, his mind reeling. He saw the faint stain and a wave of nausea, this time from pure disgust, washed over him. The weight of the moment was immense. Here he was, a man who had built an empire on logic and data, being asked to bet his life on the word of a homeless man. The man was a stranger, an unknown entity from a world Marcus had only ever seen from his limousine window. And yet, this stranger was offering him a path out of a trap that his own closest confidant had set for him. It was a terrifying test of trust. The dilemma was clear, but the choice felt impossible. On one side stood his lifelong friend, a man he had trusted with his business and his secrets. He had countless memories with him, a shared history of triumphs and losses. To believe the homeless man meant calling that entire history a lie. To trust the friend meant ignoring the undeniable evidence in front of him and gambling with his own life. The easy choice was to dismiss Ethan and believe the man he knew. But something about Ethan's calm conviction, his piercing gaze, made that choice feel like a death sentence. In that quiet alley, the future of a multi-billion-dollar company and the life of a man hung in the balance. Marcus had to decide right then and there who he was going to believe. He knew that the wrong choice would not just cost him his company, but his life. This was his biggest gamble, a truly life-changing moment, far bigger than any deal he had ever closed. He was being asked to see beyond the money, beyond the status, and to trust a person based on his character alone. Ethan wasn't asking for anything in return. He wasn't demanding money or a favor. He was simply presenting the truth, a silent gift from one human being to another. This act of pure, unselfish honesty from a man who had nothing was what truly set him apart. It was a mirror reflecting Marcus's own values, forcing him to confront a difficult question. What was more valuable, a lifelong connection built on lies, or the unshakable truth offered by a stranger? Marcus's choice was the ultimate test of trust. It would define not only his next steps but the person he would become. He had to look past the surface, the worn clothes, the lack of a home, the social distance between them, and see the man who saw him when no one else did. The moment was suspended in time, a quiet breath before a storm. He had to decide if he was going to walk back into a world of comfortable lies, or if he was going to step into a new, dangerous reality with a person he had just met. The decision he was about to make would not just change his life, but would also become a symbol of what true trust and loyalty look like, and it all began with a simple piece of cloth. With the worn rag now in his pocket, a silent and powerful piece of evidence, Marcus returned to his glass-walled office. The air felt different, charged with a tension he'd never felt before. He looked at his partners, the men he'd built his company with, and saw them not as allies but as suspects. He was no longer a victim, he was a hunter. He called an immediate, unscheduled meeting, a move so uncharacteristic that it instantly put everyone on edge. He was prepared, and he was about to unleash a storm they never saw coming. The meeting started with a deceptive calm. Marcus began by talking about the merger, but his voice was different, cold, deliberate, and razor-sharp. He watched their faces as he spoke, looking for a tell, a sign of guilt. He had learned from Ethan to trust his gut, to look for the details no one else saw. Then he changed course. He didn't shout or accuse. He simply laid out the facts, the symptoms, the pattern in his daily routine, and the chilling truth behind his favorite soup. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. His partners, so used to smooth talk and carefully crafted corporate language, were speechless. They exchanged nervous glances, their rehearsed composure crumbling. Marcus could see the confusion on their faces, the disbelief that he had uncovered their secret. But the real plot twist came when he pulled out the rag. It wasn't the kind of evidence they expected. It wasn't a dossier or a secret recording. It was a simple, damning piece of cloth, a silent testament to their betrayal. He presented the evidence with a chilling calm, explaining how a substance had been collected, how it had been planned to look like a natural medical event. And as he spoke, he looked at his friend, the man who had orchestrated the whole thing. The man's face, a mask of calm just moments before, now broke. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated shock and fear. The mask of a friend fell away, revealing the terrified face of a traitor. The silence in the room was louder than any accusation, and the betrayer's face said everything Marcus needed to hear. This wasn't just a business problem. This was a personal war. The trust he had placed in this man, the years of friendship and shared success, had been a total lie. The man had not only tried to destroy his company, but had tried to destroy his life. The discovery was a moment of profound heartbreak and fierce vindication. He had been right to trust Ethan, and in that moment, the entire world he had built, with its lies and its betrayals, was finally making sense. The meeting, which was supposed to be a final step toward his biggest success, had turned into a terrifying, emotional overcoming adversity. It was a testament to the fact that you can have all the money and power in the world, but if you don't have the right people on your side, you have nothing. The storm was about to break, and the consequences would be immense. The police were on their way, and the full weight of the law was about to descend upon the men who had planned this evil deed. This chilling confrontation was only the beginning. The real battle was not just for his company, but for his own sense of self, and the man who was about to help him win that battle was still on the street, completely unaware of the chaos he had just set in motion. The police arrived, and the meeting room, once a temple of corporate power, was now a crime scene. Marcus's partners, their faces a mix of defiance and shock, were arrested and led away. The media storm was immediate and ferocious, a firestorm of headlines about greed, betrayal, and a near-deadly conspiracy. Marcus had saved his company, his reputation, and his life. He was a hero in the eyes of the world, a man who had stared down a powerful conspiracy and won. But as the cameras flashed and the accolades poured in, Marcus felt a deep, profound emptiness. The victory tasted hollow. He had everything, his health, his company, his immense wealth. But the one thing he didn't have was a sense of gratitude. The person who truly deserved his thanks was nowhere to be found. Marcus immediately launched a citywide search for Ethan, a search more urgent and intense than any corporate takeover. He sent out his entire security team, plastered pictures of Ethan in every homeless shelter and mission, and even offered a reward not for information but for the chance to say thank you. But Ethan was gone, vanishing back into the shadows of the city as silently as he had appeared. He had left without a word, without asking for a dime, a reward, or a thank you. Marcus couldn't understand it. In a world where everyone had a price, Ethan had proven that some things were priceless. He had just saved a man from a slow, painful death, exposed a deep corporate betrayal, and then simply disappeared. Why? Why would a person who had nothing give up the chance to have everything? The mystery of his disappearance was more baffling than the conspiracy he had uncovered. It was a heartbreaking truth. The truth was that Ethan had spent so long being invisible, being overlooked, that he simply didn't know how to exist in the spotlight. He was a man who lived on the margins, and he wasn't accustomed to the kind of attention Marcus was offering. He wasn't seeking a reward or a place in a high-rise office building. What he had done wasn't for money or fame. It was for a reason far more profound, a reason Marcus was just beginning to understand. His entire existence was a testament to the idea that some people do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. He had seen a man in trouble, and his instincts, his moral compass, had forced him to act. The idea of a reward or of suddenly becoming a public figure was a foreign concept to him. It was a terrifying prospect. He had done his part, and in his mind the story was over. He had walked away to return to his life, a life of quiet dignity, without a single expectation. Marcus, however, couldn't let it go. He was a man who solved problems, and the disappearance of Ethan was a problem that had to be solved. He knew, in his gut, that finding Ethan wasn't just about saying thank you. It was about filling the emptiness in his own heart, a void left by the betrayal of his friend. He realized that the greatest overcoming adversity wasn't in saving his company, but in finding the man who had given him a new perspective on life, on humanity, and on what it means to be truly rich. The search for Ethan became Marcus's new purpose. It was no longer about money or power. It was about finding the one person who had shown him that true wealth has nothing to do with what's in your bank account, but everything to do with the content of your character. The emptiness Marcus felt wasn't a void that money could fill. He had stared down death and betrayal and had come out on top, but the victory meant nothing without the man who had made it possible. He finally understood that the greatest overcoming adversity wasn't the survival of his company, but the rediscovery of his own humanity. The betrayal had shown him the worst of people, but Ethan had shown him the best. His new purpose wasn't about making more money. It was about finding the one person who had reminded him what it meant to be alive. Marcus's search for Ethan wasn't about charity. He wasn't looking for a person to save. He was looking for a partner. He was a man who knew how to build an empire, but Ethan was a man who knew how to see the truth. That combination, he realized, was more powerful than anything he could buy. He wanted to help Ethan achieve his true dream, something he had given up on long ago, a dream that was buried under years of hardship and neglect. He had a debt to pay, not in dollars, but in dignity. The search was methodical, relentless, and intensely personal. Marcus started to walk the streets himself, visiting the same shelters and soup kitchens Ethan might have. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a man on a mission. He talked to people, listened to their stories, and began to see the city not as a backdrop for his success, but as a complex ecosystem of human lives, all with their own struggles and triumphs. He was learning to see the world through Ethan's eyes, and the world looked profoundly different. He learned that Ethan had been a proud veteran, a man who had served his country with honor but had been failed by the system he had sworn to protect. The betrayal from his old partner had been a financial one, but Ethan's betrayal had been from the country he loved, a wound far deeper and more complex. Marcus realized that his search was not just for a man, but for a way to make things right, not just for Ethan, but for a whole generation of forgotten heroes. The more he searched, the more he changed. The cold, calculated billionaire was slowly being replaced by a man with compassion and purpose. He was no longer a symbol of financial success, but a symbol of hope. He was building bridges not just for a merger, but for a community. He understood that true wealth wasn't in the amount of money you have, but in the impact you can make on others. He had never felt this alive, this driven. The thrill of the chase was no longer about a new deal, but about finding a man who had given him a new lease on life. He had to find Ethan. He had to show him that his act of kindness, his simple, quiet dignity, had a ripple effect that was changing not just one life, but a whole community. The search was not just for a man, but for a chance at redemption, a chance to prove that it's never too late to start over, and that sometimes the best way to help yourself is by helping others. After weeks of searching, Marcus finally found Ethan in a forgotten corner of the city. It wasn't a place of desperation, but a quiet, almost peaceful spot under a bridge, where Ethan had created a small, neat space for himself. Marcus approached him not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a man who had been humbled, whose life had been saved. He sat down and, with a sincerity that was completely new to him, he spoke about the search, the betrayal, and the profound lesson he had learned. He didn't offer to buy him a new suit or a new car. He offered something much more valuable. He offered a life-changing moment, a new kind of deal. Marcus explained his new vision, a powerful idea that had been born from their strange encounter. A non-profit organization dedicated to helping veterans get off the streets. This wasn't charity. It was a mission. The goal wasn't just to provide food and shelter, but to help these forgotten heroes find a renewed sense of purpose, a place in the world again. Marcus had the resources, and Ethan had the experience, the authenticity, and the heart to make it a reality. Ethan listened, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and wonder. This was it, the dream he had long since buried. He had always wanted to help his fellow veterans, to ensure that no one else fell through the cracks the way he had. He had believed that his purpose was gone, that his life was a forgotten story. But now, here was this billionaire, a man he had saved, offering him the very thing he had given up on. It was a second chance, a true, unbelievable true story coming to life. For Marcus, this was his redemption. It wasn't about the money he was investing, but about the impact he was making. He was using his immense power for good, to right a wrong that had not just affected Ethan, but countless others. He was finally finding a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with corporate profits or market shares. The emptiness he had felt after the victory was gone, replaced by a feeling of hope and true fulfillment. This was a different kind of partnership, built not on contracts or agreements, but on mutual respect and shared experience. They were two men from completely different worlds, now united by a single powerful goal. The betrayal that had almost destroyed Marcus's life had become the catalyst for this incredible, new beginning. He was finally learning that a person's greatest value isn't measured by their financial portfolio, but by the size of their heart. And in that quiet corner of the city, a new story began to unfold. A story of healing, of hope, and of two unlikely friends working together to change the world. It was a powerful new chapter, but the most incredible part was still yet to come. The final scene shows Marcus and Ethan sitting across a table, not a mahogany boardroom table, but a simple desk in a small, bustling office. They are no longer a billionaire and a homeless man, but partners in a new venture, the new beginning. They're side by side, working on blueprints and budgets. Their conversation a blend of Marcus's business savvy and Ethan's first-hand knowledge. Their past lives, one of immense wealth and the other of grinding poverty, now serve a single, powerful purpose: to help forgotten veterans find their way home and rediscover their dignity. Their new venture became a symbol of redemption and hope, a living testament to the idea that anyone can change, and that the greatest overcoming adversity is found not in a hostile takeover, but in a selfless act of kindness. Marcus had found a new kind of satisfaction, a fulfillment that his billions had never been able to buy. He was using his power and influence for a purpose far greater than himself, and in doing so, he was finally healing from the deep wounds of his friend's betrayal. He was learning that true wealth has nothing to do with what you own, but with what you build for others. Ethan, in turn, had found his purpose again. He was no longer a shadow, a forgotten man on the street corner. He was a leader, a mentor, and a powerful voice for his community. He was finally using his skills for a mission he had always believed in, a mission that was now a powerful reality. Their unlikely, unbelievable true story became a legend in the city, inspiring countless others to look past the surface and see the human potential that lies within everyone, no matter their circumstance. Their friendship, forged in the fires of a life-or-death moment, was a testament to the idea that loyalty, honesty, and compassion are the greatest currencies in the world. And so, the story of the billionaire and the homeless man ends not with a grand gesture of charity, but with a quiet, powerful partnership. It's a reminder that a simple act of observation can save a life, that a silent gesture can change the world, and that sometimes, the greatest treasures are found not in boardrooms, but on street corners. The true value of a person is not found in what they have, but in who they are. This incredible story teaches us a simple but powerful lesson. What you see on the outside doesn't define a person's worth. The most valuable heroes are often the ones we don't even notice. If you were touched by this story, remember to subscribe for more amazing tales of life-changing moments and unexpected breakthroughs. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that hope can be found in the most surprising places.